This meeting is being recorded.
All right. So wanted to talk about baseball being back. I wanted to talk about things that I love in announcing, like Joe Buck and Troy Aikman now leaving Fox and going to ESPN, and the national nightmare of Fox baseball and football with Troy Aikman now officially being over. But then I looked at the calendar and it said March. So I got nothing cute to say. You know what this means. Welcome to the best sports month of the year. I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan. Welcome to the madness.
I'm Anthony Strait. First off, I want to congratulate all the teams that do have the automatic bids and are going dancing. I just got one thing to say to all the teams out there who will be in March Madness. Welcome to the big time, baby. That's all I got to say. This is not think I was going to not wear this show and throw in a plug. Are you kidding me, Rabbi? How long you know me?
Big time, Anthony. Welcome to our March Madness Bracketology edition. All right. You don't get, no, Anthony doesn't get this as big time. You don't get to pop this and just say, oh, it's a basketball show. All right.
No, it's from March Madness 2001.
I know. When me and Anthony were both still in high school. All right. The Denver Broncos, we're going to talk about the top seeds, the last teams in, the last teams out, mid-majors to watch, all the little nooks and crannies, as we are about 30 hours away from the revealing of the brackets and the madness truly getting into high gear. We'll get you ready. But first, because this is America and the NFL is tremendously king, it never goddamn stops. So the Denver Broncos last won the Super Bowl on February 7th, 2016. Since then, I can't count. They have had 11 2-1s different starting quarterbacks since that time. That's almost 2 a season in the 6th season since. So to help the future and get themselves back in Lombardi contention, the Broncos went to the QB that beat them for the Lombardi Trophy on February 2nd, 2014, in a warm day at Giant Stadium in the Seattle Seahawks, Russell Wilson. 5 draft picks, Drew Lock, Noah Fant, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, and possibly all the Rocky Mountain weed that you could imagine going to Seattle, and Russell Wilson, and a 4th-round draft pick coming to Denver. This is, of course, pending a physical and a waiving of a no-trade clause, but semantics, come on now. If this gets broken up, then why are we even here? All right, Anthony, whoa, your reaction.
Well, first of all, that was my reaction. My coworker just called me on randomly and said, check your phone. I mean, did you see what Denver just did? For Seattle, it's the end of an era. I mean, you think about it like this. Pete Carroll came in 2010, and even though they won a division title and obviously a playoff game, they were 7-9 the first 2 years. Then they drafted Russell Wilson, and you kind of saw the wheels start to turn as far as the Seahawks being a perennial contender. You know, they had that young defense led by Richard Sherman and Earl Thomas and Cam Chancellor and the Legion of Boom. And it's almost like, okay, well, the final piece was a trade for Marshawn Lynch that people kind of overlooked at the time. But it rounded out what became a really sound, fundamentally great football team. And Russell Wilson beat out Matt Ryan for the starting quarterback position.
Matt Flynn, and not Matt Ryan, everybody.
Matt Flynn. And they went to the playoffs in 2012, but then the following year, they were in the Super Bowl. So when you look at the run that the Seahawks have for the last 10 years, and really up until last year, not really having a losing record, and the count in the division titles, obviously 2 Super Bowl appearances at time, winning 1, and should have been a 2nd Super Bowl. We all know what happened down on the 1-yard line with the play calling. To that 10 years, it's just been a phenomenal run for the Seahawks. But then you look at what they've been the last few years, and kind of like delaying the inevitable as far as a rebuild. Russell Wilson's 33 now, and he's older. He's been beat up quite a bit. Pete Carroll's in his 70s now. And a lot of those guys that were part of those teams have moved on. So they kind of need to finally start the reset. And you think about the trade, the draft picks they're getting back, because remember, they gave away so many draft picks in the Jamal Adams trade a couple of summers ago. They get some of those back and a chance to kind of get the reset going. But Carroll, he'll be 71 when the season starts. You got to wonder how long will he be around as far as being a head coach. But as far as the Seahawks, at least on their part, they have to get this rebuild going sooner rather than later, and they chose sooner and decided, hey, we're just gonna move forward. We want to acquire some access and basically try to repeat the same rebuilding success that they were able to transform into what was a decade of the Seahawks being one of the more premier teams in the NFL.
And Bobby Wagner gets released that day or later that night, and they both joined the organization on the same day in 2012. So it really is just a marriage of everything. And God, I don't know what Pete Carroll is going to do in this situation, because he's not getting any younger, and being a 77-year-old head coach, as you said, who the hell knows what is going to be in store for him. Okay. For the Broncos, I'm going to temper your expectations, but I'm going to raise your expectations. Here's why. I think to raise the expectations is very simple. They haven't had a competent quarterback in God knows how long. You could say everything you want, but Teddy Bridgewater is a game manager. Drew Lock is a game mismanager. Paxton Lynch is also a game. You could almost have negative effect with Paxton Lynch on there. Trevor Siemian. There has been no quarterback to lead this offense that has been considered anywhere good again since Peyton Manning was left on the team. Now, you need to have a quarterback to win in the NFL. You need to have a competent quarterback to win in the NFL. The Broncos needed a seat at the table, and getting Russell Wilson gets you a seat at the table. Unfortunately for the AFC, and I think Denver needs that, because you have Cortland Sutton, you have Jerry Jeudy, you have Tim Patrick. All of these elements in here, decent defense, can be good at times. Offensive pieces there, but you need someone to get them the ball. So it reminds me a lot of when Tom Brady joined Tampa Bay. We didn't know what Tom Brady was until he went down to Tampa Bay as a current quarterback. He didn't have a great end of the season in his last year in New England, and then he all of a sudden rounds into form, and he is a playoff leader. If the Broncos get to the playoffs, you have a Super Bowl winning quarterback. There aren't that many in the NFL leading your team. Now let me temper your expectations. Remember that table that I said that they have a seat at? That table is crowded. Josh Allen has a seat at the head of the table. Roman Reigns does not have a seat at the head of the table, Anthony. This is not your tribal chiefs table. Joe Burrow is at that table. Lamar Jackson is at that table. You have, in your own division, Patrick Mahomes is at that table. You have Justin Herbert at that table. And oh yeah, you also have Derek Carr at that table. All of these quarterbacks and Russell Wilson having a good team in Denver. Are they a Super Bowl contender? No, absolutely not. Now, I said there are shades of what has happened in Tampa Bay in this team, but guess what? There is no history of this team winning. You don't have a Bruce Arians as your head coach. You have Nathaniel Hackett, who has never been a head coach in his entire life. You have a lot of young pieces in there. As much as Jerry Jeudy is really good, he's not Mike Evans. And you're going to need veterans for the Denver Broncos to actually, outside of Wilson, to actually get you back into playoff contention. And I don't know if they're going to get that. I want to see what Denver does for the rest of this free agency period, new league period that's about to begin. But most of all, you can almost say Russell Wilson is the third best quarterback in the AFC West. And I think many people would agree with you, Jay.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting is, for me being a quarterback, you have this trade and, right on the heels of that barely was, the ink dry on the Russell Wilson headlines, and Carson Wentz gets traded from the Colts to the Commanders. Gonna have to get used to saying that, aren't we, guys?
I just say Washington and just move on, or I just say the commies and just move on.
So for me, this is just the latest in in how the quarterback position is changing its importance, and what I'm going to look at here with you guys is how the Wilson trade specifically, and to a lesser extent the Wentz trade, impacts what I'm going to call the quarterback calculus. The free agency and the draft scenarios. Now, look. Denver giving up a huge slate of draft picks to get Wilson is proof of two things. One, teams that don't feel they have, as you said, Rabbi, competent QB1 play will go out of their way, sometimes in a big way, to upgrade the NFL's premier position. And B, that both this year's free agency and draft pools for starting quarterbacks is not considered top notch. I mean, the game has changed to the point where it's all about the passing game, which means it's all about the quarterback position. This has created two classes of teams, those with top flight quarterbacks, your haves, and those without, your have-nots. And with team success more and more reliant on top flight quarterback play, you have coaches, GMs, and owners who are less and less patient and more likely to jettison a quarterback they don't feel is the answer, even if they don't really have a plan B. I mean, the Colts getting rid of Wentz is an example here. His numbers were more than adequate overall, but when you screw the pooch against Jacksonville and cost your team a playoff spot, have an owner that is volatile, I'm being diplomatic here, Rabbi, we talked about.
Yes, you are, I know.
And there are rumors about a rift in the locker room and issues with Wentz taking coaching from a guy who was his biggest backer at his previous stop. You wind up, a guy like Wentz winds up in DC, which has been desperate for better than average quarterback play since Kirk Cousins left. That in itself tells you something. I mean, think about it. It's why the Rams mortgaged their future draft capital. Granted, that's not anything new for them, to get Matthew Stafford, which resulted in a Super Bowl win. Denver knew it needed a major upgrade at quarterback to compete in a division, Rabbi, as you noted, that has Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and Derek Carr. The Commanders knew that improved quarterback play will allow them to compete with Dallas for supremacy in the NFC least. The NFL is a copycat league, so you may start seeing more and more teams think that they're just a quarterback away from being a legit contender and look to make a blockbuster trade to get one. But NFL teams are still going to gamble, in some instances overpay on guys like Jameis Winston or Mitchell Trubisky, thinking that a change of scenery, coaching, and scheme will bring out the potential that got them drafted so high in the first place. And I can pretty much guarantee you that if he's healthy and wants to play, Ryan Fitzpatrick, even at age 39, will get signed by yet another team. It would be his 10th, desperate enough to believe he can give them more Fitz magic than Fitz tragic and make them competitive. Yeah, we all know the Teddy Bridgewaters, Jacoby Brissett's, and Tyrod Taylors of the NFL are not going to win you a Super Bowl, even get you there on their own. But you put good playmakers around them, build a good defense, and they can keep you competitive and hopefully keep an impatient owner off your back until you can find your next franchise quarterback. But you have to recognize that such passers do not grow on trees, and finding one actually requires patience, due diligence by your player personnel people, and having the right coaching staff and scheme in place for when there is one to be had. It's also why NFL teams reach ridiculously for quarterbacks in the draft and rush them onto the field, even if they're not even close to ready. This year's quarterback class is underwhelming, but one thing I can pretty much guarantee you is if one team that's quarterback desperate will reach for someone like Liberty's Malik Williams, who has great physical tools but is nowhere near ready to be an NFL starter, or Pitt's Kenny Hack Pickett, who may be the most NFL ready but is not in the way Mac Jones was. None of the quarterbacks in this draft class should be day one picks, in my opinion. I'll get into that as we get closer to the NFL draft. And none are ready to start from day one. But this is the NFL we live in, where the pressure is so intense to find the next Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, or Herbert that patience in actually developing quarterbacks has gone out the window. I'll leave you with this, guys. We'll see Seattle at number 9 or Indy with their first pick in the second round at number 47 reach for one of the quarterbacks in this year's class. What about the Falcons at number 8? Matt Ryan's not going to be around forever. Or the Browns at number 13 with all the noise we've been hearing out of Cleveland about them being a little more uncertain now about the future of Baker Mayfield as their franchise quarterback. Will Arizona be tempted to use the 6th pick on a quarterback after the Sam Darnold debacle? Or will they be one of the teams that overpay for one of the free agent quarterbacks? Welcome to the new NFL, gentlemen. The quarterback is king, and that may be good for the league, but what it's causing teams to do in pursuit of that position may not be.
Well, apologies to Malik Willis of Liberty, who you called Malik Williams, but that's perfectly okay.
Williams, I have it written down as Willis.
And Anthony, what were we talking about again at the beginning of this segment? Because it just became a get off my lawn quarterback rant from Jay at the end of it. I think we were talking about Joe Buck or something. Anyway, let's move on to what we're really here for. All right. This is the one thing that gets me really excited until 11:59 next Friday, when you realize your bracket ain't worth jack, We're down to the field of 32. The games are going to be terrible because it's a 14 versus a goddamn 15, and this 14 versus a goddamn 6 in the second round of the second/third round of the tournament. I'm happy that we are going to at least get this part done. All right. So we're going to talk about March Madness. The NCAA tournament goes back into its regular form for the first time in 3 years, starting on Tuesday with the first 4. But for right now, we're going to start with the cream of the crop, where, my friends, there is a little bit of volatility. At least 6 teams can claim a possible number 1 seed. Now, we're not the committee, but let's congratulate and assume that the Gonzaga Bulldogs, WCC champions and only 3-loss team during the season, are getting a 1 seed and very, very likely the overall number 1. So that leaves us 5 other teams that have been deemed worthy for a number 1 spot, but there are only 3 that can get it. We're each going to give us a case for one of the last ones. Anthony, let's start with you.
Well, my case and my team is going to be for the Arizona Wildcats, who are the other team with just 3 losses in the regular season, and obviously 28-3 regular season record, 33 overall if you count tournament wins, and they pretty much has been as good as Gonzaga been all season. Think about this: Tommy Lloyd, he's first year into his job, and the leaps and bounds that this team has made in just such a short time has been phenomenal. Look at their resume. They're 5-3 in quadrant 1 games, 9-0 as far as quadrant 2 games. Best wins against Illinois, UCLA, beating USC, which is pretty big, and I have a win against Michigan under the belt. Right now, Joe Lodati and Bracketology, I was just looking it up. He has them as a 1 seed in the South region, which I think would definitely play in favor of Arizona to be close to the home as possible. But when you look at the only 3 losses and the fact that they're pretty much in the Pac-12 title game, it's pretty much a lock that they'll at least have an opportunity at one of the remaining 3 seeds, 3 top seeds overall. And you look at the other teams that's vying for them, there's 2 of them is in the same conference. And that's the Big 12. You're talking about Baylor and Kansas respectively. So I think either one or both of those are going to take the remaining 2. But Arizona, they've done a great job this year. Pretty much the worst loss was really Tennessee or UCLA, which will obviously the quadrant 1. So it doesn't hurt them overall. I think if they win the Pac-12 championship, it pretty much locks them into one of the 1 seeds moving forward.
And Arizona would walk into a pod in San Diego, which will help them for the first round, and they'll beat the San Antonio, which is about as good for them as it would be to go to the West for San Francisco. So I think Arizona is in very good shape, but we'll talk a lot more about the Wildcats as everything goes along. They are a very good story this year and a team that has rebuilt very, very quickly, more quickly than expected. Jay, let's talk about the Jayhawks.
Yeah, Kansas, 26-6, 14-4, Big 12 regular season champs. It's a team with a net rating of 7, strength of schedule of 10. Here's a stat that I saw the other day that blew my mind. In 19 years in Lawrence, Bill Self has more Big 12 titles, 16, than home court losses, 15. That's about flat out insane and proof of just how good this program continues to be in the post-Roy Williams era. The Big 12 is the number 1 ranked conference in terms of net rating, and they have the best non-conference winning percentage, 827, and they have 3 teams in the top 10 in net rating, 4 in the top 25. Kansas, as I said, 7th in net. SOS, is 9th, not 10th. Their strength of record is number 2 in the nation. 25 of their 32 games are quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. They went 19-6 in those games, 11-5 in Q1, 8-1 in Q2. They have 2 losses outside of the Big 12, to Kentucky at home, which is a quadrant 1 game, and to Dayton on a neutral court. Again, that's a quadrant 2 game. And Dayton's the only loss on their slate can even be remotely considered a bad loss, but it was by 1 back around Thanksgiving. And Dayton is still on the fringes of the tournament right now. This Jayhawks team is good enough to make a run to the Final Four if the bracket breaks right. They have Oche Abaji. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right.
You actually are on that one.
He's one of the best offensive weapons in the nation, 19.8 points per game. He leads them. Solid front court with Braun and McCormick. But Kansas is not in the best team in college hoop conversation this year. And some of Bill Self's best teams have actually played better in March when they're not in that conversation, almost like the pressure is off them, so to speak. With Baylor losing in the Big 12 tournament, the path to another conference tournament title is a lot less treacherous for the Jayhawks. No disrespect to Texas Tech, but who would you rather play? That said, the Red Raiders are a projected number 3 seed in the tournament, in the NCAAs rather, and they beat the Jayhawks by 8 in Lubbock and lost to them by only 3 in Lawrence. So beating them tonight only strengthens the case for Bill Self's team to get a number 1 seed. Let me be clear, guys. I think both Kansas and Baylor make the 1 line, but if Kansas beats Texas Tech today, I think they're locked in as the Midwest number 3 seed, and I think they get locked in as the 3rd number 1 seed in that S curve behind Gonzaga and Arizona.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Kansas is, I would say, pretty much a lock to get that to basically feed into something that'll be very easy for them, feed into Chicago. Yeah. And they'll play their first round games in Fort Worth, most likely, because that's the closest that they can be at. Baylor is my 4th number 1, and I had a little bit of trouble with this. I originally was thinking after Baylor had lost to Oklahoma played a very good game. They won 72-67, but Baylor, remember, they also lost last year in the semifinals of the Big 12 tournament, and no biggie, they just won a national title. And by the way, they still got the number 2 overall seed when the bracket was announced that Sunday. Kansas and Baylor tied for the Big 12 conference championship this year. Baylor did beat Kansas second to last week of the season. Baylor is number 3 in the net ratings before Thursday's loss. They have 10 quad 1 wins. I'm glad I'm never going to say quad 1 after tomorrow. Tied for the most with Gonzaga. They have wins over Stanford, Michigan State, Villanova, and Oregon. They did lose to Alabama. They did have a worse regular season than they did last year, but the Big 12 has gotten better. Don't mess with Texas Tech. They just seem to continuously win and win, even though their coach right now is doing what many people do with Texas, and that's underachieve. But Baylor is a team that you need to just watch out for around tournament time. I think regardless of what happens, they're going to probably be in a bracket with Kentucky in the East in Philadelphia. They still have a ton of experience from last year's team. Sure, Mitchell is not there anymore. Sure, they're not going to have a bigger presence up front, but you still got Dale Bonner. You still have just a lot of good starters on this team from last year's team. And Scott Drew knows the pressure is definitely going to be off. A defending champion who was only ranked 9th going into the preseason, going back and doing exactly what they did last year, pretty much. They are a 6-loss team this year compared to what they were last year. I like Baylor's chances. And if I look at this bracketology right here, I see a possible 2nd-round matchup for Baylor, which we might talk about when we convene on Monday, Jay. Is your North Carolina Tar Heels. And that's not a good matchup. Baylor's not a good matchup for anybody in this NCAA tournament. They play physical, and they're a team that just gets at it. I'm very interested to see what Baylor's path will be come March. I don't think it's going to help, especially that if they're in a region with Kentucky, Kentucky is going to fill a possible regional final at Wells Fargo Center to the Raptors. But if there's any team that I think that can counteract a home court advantage, that would be the Baylor Bears.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me, Rabbi, is that, I mean, when you think about it, when you and I first started talking last week, or, last weekend, putting this show together, and we were looking, we thought that there were 6 teams that at that point were very much in the conversation for the 4 number 1 seeds. You had the 2 Big 12 teams, obviously Gonzaga and Arizona, but we had the 2 teams that were atop the SEC, which was Kentucky and Auburn. And Auburn losing badly yesterday knocked them out of that conversation. It's interesting that the place that the Big 12 is held in terms of arguably being the best conference in the nation this year, that Baylor losing doesn't hurt them doesn't really hurt their case for being on the 1 line, even if Kentucky wins the SEC tournament.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, Kentucky didn't finish 2nd in the SEC this year. They finished 3rd. They played Tennessee today, and that's a game that I think will determine I think if Kentucky wins that game, they're 50-50 in my opinion to get that 1 seed in the East. But again, as I say beforehand, 1 and 2 doesn't really matter too much. It matters where you go,
where you are,
and who you play.
Yeah, I tell you this, Rabbi. I think all that Kentucky beating Tennessee today will do. Well, I think we'll lock them in as to being the atop the two line.
It'll lock them into the East, and I think that's the most important
the
thing.
top number 2 seed. Yeah,
I think honestly they should already be there, but that's just my opinion because again, Auburn struggled a very huge bit after being the best team in the country for about 4 months this year. All right, let's move on. Very rarely do you get to hear this next phrase. Geez, I hope we get to go to Dayton, Ohio. But that's what the deal is for these teams who hope to be the last ones into the tournament. They don't even care if they have to play a first 4 game. Let's go. Let's get some wins there.
Last year.
That's exactly right. Let's make some teams happy. Jag, give me your last team in.
I got to tell you, I was literally on the bubble with my pick for this segment. Right up.
Damn it.
Couldn't resist, Rabbi. Come on now.
I know.
But
I know.
And my pick is Indiana, who went 20-12, 9-11 in the Big Ten. They have a net of 41, a strength of schedule of 44. And the only reason I'm going with them is, how do you not after they followed up their huge come from behind win over Michigan by knocking off the top seeded, Illinois in a tightly contested game, Friday morning. Both ESPN and The Athletic have the Hoosiers in the last 4 bye line, meaning they avoid the first 4 games, but that could change based on what happens over the weekend. Though if they somehow beat Iowa today in the Big Ten semis, the bubble they were firmly ensconced on coming into the Big Ten tournament, I think will be firmly in their rear view. Even if they lose to the Hawkeyes and the other bubble teams play on, I don't think they fall any further than last 4 in, meaning they'll be playing for one of the number 12 seeds on either Tuesday or Wednesday. Hoosiers went 9-11 against the second best conference in the nation by net rating. Their own net, as I mentioned, 41 in strength of schedule, 44 are tournament worthy. Those are probably going to go up a little bit with their previous 2 wins. And even if, no matter what happens today, they went 8-11 in quadrant 1, quadrant 2 games, but only one of their losses was outside of the Big Ten. And it was a road game at Syracuse. Not a bad loss. The Hoosiers have regular season wins over Purdue, Illinois, Ohio State, and Michigan on their resume. Losing to Rutgers at home in a quadrant 3 game may or may not hurt, depending on how the committee views the Scarlet Knights' own resume. But they came into the Big Ten tournament having lost 7 of their last 9 after a 16-5 start, and were teetering on the edge of the bubble, walking the line between last in and first out. Then came that 29-4 run that I watched in shock, being a Michigan fan, as you guys know. All the, bringing them back all the way from being down 17 against the Wolverines with 12 minutes left in the quarterfinals. As I said, by going toe-to-toe with the Illini all the way to the last possession and holding on to that 65-63 win. Trace Jackson Davis has led them all year. And so far in the Big Ten tournament, he's averaging 22.5 points and 7.5 boards on 63% field goal shooting. He put up 18-11 in the Hoosiers' 83-74 regular season loss to Iowa. Something to keep in mind. He's obviously going to have to come up big today if they're going to keep the Hoosiers on their Hoosier-like run through the Big Ten tournament. Who knows? But as I said at the top, no matter today's outcome, I think Mike Woodson's team is headed to the big dance one way or another.
Anthony, you're about to remind me why I stayed up till 2 a.m. last night watching Mid-Mountain West Conference tournament action. I'm shamed, but you have to talk about the team that finished 4th in that conference this year.
Yeah, I'm talking about the Wyoming Cowboys of the Mountain, out to the Mountain West, and they got their resume, everything as far as as far as strength of schedule, KenPom, net. It's all in the 40s and the 50s. I mean, they're 25. They were pretty much a lock going into the month of February. Has a tournament team, but then they hit this stretch, saw with a bad loss against New Mexico on February 15th, and they finished, stumbling down the stretch, losing 4 of the last 6 games, and they went from a automatic lock to being a tournament to a bubble team almost instantly, as much as quickly as they became the darlings of the first half of the season because of their run. They were able to rebound. They won the season finale, the last game. and then just survive barely. UNLV in a first round of Mountain West tournament. Gave Boise State last night a pretty good fight. Obviously, Hunter Maldonado, the best player, fouling out. It basically was a bad call. I did not think he committed a foul on that play. That really did not help matters. But I do think Wyoming, with their record and the fact that they were able to kind of right the ship at just the right time and win under the belt and obviously given a tough team like Boise State. And keep in mind, they were a 4 seed in this tournament, and they got basically a road game against UNLV because the tournament is being played in Las Vegas. So much for a higher seed being rewarded in that regard. But I do think they've done enough to at least get them into the tournament right now. They're listed as in one of the playing games, the first 4 games. Maybe they can move up to 11 seed and perhaps avoid that altogether. But I think right now, the way Wyoming stumbled the last 3.5 weeks of the season, they'll take whatever infight they can get. But I think they've done just enough to hold on to one of those playing slots and maybe going as a 12. And like you mentioned, UCLA last year, you just want an opportunity to get in. You get in the tournament, who knows what can happen. And I think Wyoming, I think they're safe for now.
The Mountain West, which has been traditionally a volatile conference, although San Diego State has made 5 consecutive MWC titles, got all 4 of their top seeds in the semifinals. And the reason is simple. This has been a 14 league this year. Boise State, you're going to see them in March. You're going to see Colorado State in March. You're going to see San Diego State in March. Projections are right now that the MWC has as many bids going to the tournament as the ACC does. Dark times indeed, especially for Jay's beloved conference. All right. Speaking of dark times indeed for a conference, let's talk about the Big Ten. They're really good. And you would think if you finish 4th in the Big Ten, you're locked into the tournament. But Rutgers is in a little bit of trouble, but I do have them in. And here's why. If you look at the dictionary and you see the definition of bubble team, you're going to find a picture of that annoying Scarlet Knight head right next to its face. If you ever see the Scott Van Pelt commercial when he takes a call and Rutgers head is one of the one calls in there that says Scott Van Pelt is in for the conference and then nobody answers and he's like, what is everybody doing? Rutgers is the definition of your bubble team. They are 6-6 in quad 1, 9-10 quads 1 and 2, quads 3 and 4. I'm sorry, 6-6 quad 1, 9-10 quads 1 and 2, 9-3 quads 3 and 4. There are so many good things about this team that easily can put them into the tournament. They are 12-9 in the Big Ten Conference. They got a double bye into the quarterfinals where they lost to Iowa. Iowa's one of the hottest teams in the country right now. No shame in a loss to them. Top 40 net wins. They've beaten Purdue. They've beaten Iowa. They've beaten Illinois. So they have a win against number 1, Illinois. Number 2 in the conference, Wisconsin. Number 3 in the conference, Purdue. They've beaten Iowa this season. That's number 5. They've beaten Ohio State. That's the 6th best team of the conference. Michigan State 7, Indiana 8. Yes, they've beaten at least once, all 9 of the top seeds in the conference. That's great. And I think when you do that, especially because of all of the stuff that they've done this year, they should easily be in. They have 2 quadrant 1 road wins. Their net ranking is 78. Ken Palm has them at 75. They are eye test. They should be one of the teams in. That's obvious. And they are not a great neutral site team either, by the way. But if you look at the schedule at the beginning of the year, they are 6-4 with that schedule, which would be good because non-conference schedules are always hard for most teams. That is the 299th best schedule in the nation. Yes, very few teams had easier schedules than Rutgers, and they went 6-4. Losses include a 3-game stretch of losses to DePaul, Lafayette, and UMass, the 10th team in the Big East, the 10th team in the Atlantic 10, and I don't even know where Lafayette placed this year. I didn't have time to research that. So overall, I would say despite the fact that Stony Brook college legend Steve Peichel did get a new contract with Rutgers just a few days ago before their tournament game, I would say Steve is going to have to be sweating it out on Selection Sunday. But considering brackets have Michigan in, and God damn it, I don't know why, although Joe Lunardi and a bunch of people have now moved them into the first four. Thank God, because I haven't seen a team so disjointed, sorry, Jay, on the court this whole entire year.
It's appropriate.
The Big Ten can be a cluster F, and I think Rutgers is one of those teams in that cluster F that deserves to be in this tournament. The Big Ten has the possibility, and I think will end up being a 9-bid league. And I think if you're going to include 9 bids, you might as well just include the team who finished 4th. That's pretty
really 9, you think, Rabbi?
They have everybody. Right now, Bracketologies have everyone who is on the bubble in, and I can't see, especially Indiana would have been the closest team that I thought would have been out, but
that's true.
Unless Indiana does something, gets killed today by Iowa, I think they're in. I agree with you. All right. So it's fun to see teams get in, but it's more fun to see teams get left out and see us aimlessly argue for hours about something that doesn't even have an answer. It's just a 10 or 12 person committee that decides for us. So we can't read their minds. But anyway, let's talk about the first teams out. Jay, break the bad news. Let's talk about the first teams out. Jay, break the bad news.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear you. Kind of jiggered there.
Okay.
I thought he was like really like playing into the role of being a bad news breaker.
I am the bad news breaker. Yes, I don't want to say this bad news, but we're doing it.
Okay, I was kind of waiting for that.
Go ahead.
All right. So here it is. My team that's going to be first 4 out is Xavier out of the Big East. 18-13 overall, 8-11 in the conference. Their net is 40. Their strength of schedule is 33. And the Musketeers have been walking the tightrope that is the cut line for some time now. Bracketologists are trying to figure out which version of the team would show up in the crucible that is the Big East tournament, as that would determine whether their bubble would float or burst. I think we can safely say it burst with their overtime loss in the first round of the Big East tournament to a 13-18 Butler team with a net rating of 128. The Athletic and ESPN both have the Musketeers on the last 4 in line. I do not. The loss to Butler will not be the reason Xavier doesn't get in, though losing after being up 6 with 44 seconds in regulation because you keep refusing charity at the stripe, going an ugly 13 of 29 does not put a good last image in the committee's mind. The Musketeers came into MSG squarely on the bubble because they followed a 14-3 start that had them ranked in the top 20 in the net rating and other metrics by losing 10 of their last 14, 8 of their last 10, 6 of their last 7, including 5 straight in the back half of February. Yeah, they have wins over teams in the net top 30, UConn, Ohio State at home, Virginia Tech on a neutral court, and they have 5 quad 1 wins in total. And yes, they went 10-1 in their non-conference schedule, but 7 of those were against quad 3 or quad 4, and their non-conference strength of schedule is 127. Here's the thing. The committee tends to prioritize who did you beat. They use that argument, not when you beat them. So that may save Xavier. When your last loss is a bad one in quad 3 on a neutral court, that makes you look like a lot of the other bubble teams that are teetering towards the wrong side of the cut line. Here's the difference, though. Those other bubble teams, like Dayton, like Virginia Tech, and SMU, they're still playing, so they have a chance to strengthen their case. Xavier doesn't, and it's why I have them out.
Flop. It was a flop. Very simple to say. Although Butler did play pretty damn good basketball against Providence in that quarterfinal, but you can't lose the 8-9 game. If you don't make it to Thursday, if you lose in the first round of any tournament, I want you gone immediately unless you have a very good reason to be there. So I'm just saying you need to at least make the quarterfinals of your goddamn conference tournament. Yeah. Anthony, let's go to the A10.
Yeah, it's funny because my first team, my last team man was actually Xavier until that loss, and then I hit you guys. I'm like, hey guys, I kind of want to change my team a little bit.
I think you had the right call on that too.
You had the right call.
Put the kibosh on their chances, but I want to pay attention to Dayton, and the reason why, because Dayton started out pretty decent, but they've had kind of the most up and down, confusing resume you could possibly have.
I don't know. I showed you Rutgers' resume before. I think we're going to be even on that.
Okay, second most confusing resume. They were like this. The best victory, they beat Kansas 74-70 during a buzzer beater. And as Jay mentioned, it's not when you beat a team, it's basically who you beat. But it's also who do you lose to? They lost 78-59 at home to Lipscomb. That's a team that is 14-19 and has not beaten anyone in the top 200 of the net. So they they really put themselves kind of in a clusterfuck. When you think about some of these losses they took, they lost to Austin P also on November 20th. And that's a team that finished 12-17 and also haven't beaten anybody in the top 200. So they took some bad losses, and obviously, yes, they're still playing. They have they got Richmond coming up in the semifinals of the 18 tournament. They win the first game, so they have a chance to strengthen their schedule. But now I look at the other bubble teams that they stack up. When you look at a team like Xavier or even Michigan for that matter, the resumes are almost kind of similar, especially to Michigan. And I do think the committee will pick Michigan over Dayton in a heartbeat in terms of if you take a look at the conference that the team's playing. Michigan being in a Big Ten, a tougher conference, would probably win and get that last spot in a toss-up. Look, Dayton they had their work cut out. They still got ways to go. They barely were able to survive that first game against UMass. Went on a 10-4 run late to kind of steal that game and stay alive. So let's see what they do with Richmond later on. I think if they can get to the finals, it strengthens the argument a little bit. But lost today, I think that if they lose today to Richmond, I think they will be one of those last teams out.
I think, of course, Michigan will get it over Richmond, and if not, Juwan Howard will fight you on it. Anyway, let's move on. Wake Forest is my pick, and I saw them on Wednesday play against Boston College, 13-20, and they lost in overtime 82-77. And I looked back at the resume. They were in almost every bracket even after the loss. They have now since moved out on a bunch of brackets. So apparently they finally saw what I have seen. They are one of the top 20 teams nationally. Yes, their record is really good. They're 23-9 this year, but they're playing in a terrible ACC. Remember I said that is a 4-bid league right now to a lot of people, and their teams are basically outside of North Carolina and Duke are living in the region. They can take rent up in Cutlineville right now and pay extra for it. Wake has had actually a very good non-conference season. And then I looked, 351st in the country is their non-conference strength of schedule. There are only 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the entire nation with a worse non-conference schedule than Wake Forest. You have world beaters like William and Mary, Kennesaw State, North Carolina A&T, and Charleston Southern. The one team that is legitimate in that group is LSU, and they lost to them by 14. So then you get to non-conference season, and sure, they have a win over North Carolina by 22 in January. But again, different North Carolina team. It does matter when you play them, though, because they're going to see what type of team that is when it comes down to two teams looking for a final spot. Their ACC record is good. It was good enough for them to get fifth in the conference with a 13-7 overall record. But then you have to realize you have to win all of your big games. They played Duke twice. They lost to Duke twice. They played Miami twice, who's going to be in the tournament. They lost to Miami twice. There's not really a resume you win that just says, pick me, we should go to the tournament. And I think for that reason, I just can't put a team like Wake Forest in the tournament when I can make a case, again, sorry to pick on them, for every Big Ten team to be in the tournament before Wake Forest. I can make a case for Virginia Tech, who's actually doing something in the conference tournament to be in before Wake Forest. I did not see why people had Wake Forest in to begin with. I'm glad some people are at least projecting them out now, but the committee could change their mind. But in this one man's opinion in Northeast basketball, with no actual college basketball team to speak of, because we haven't made the tournament in over 20 years, even though we've won a conference in Hofstra, I can't see Wake Forest in this year.
Yeah, before we move on, what has happened to some of these top teams? I mean, you look at it, North Carolina and Providence got throttled last night.
Providence has had their best year. Leave Providence alone. They've had their best team in decades.
Yeah, but
so
20-2 run. I mean, yikes.
Look,
Providence didn't know that game actually played. It was played last night. It seemed like
right. Rabbi, what did you text me? Somebody forgot to tell Providence the game tipped at 6:30.
Yeah, someone did forget to tell Providence because Creighton's not that good.
And I honestly, for the life of me, I mean, y'all, I know you guys don't follow North Carolina as intently as I do. So, looking at it as, potentially a one-off or from the outside, it may seem strange to you, but unfortunately, the Tar Heels have had several games like this season in the ACC where, for some inexplicable reason, they just seem to forget how to play basketball. They play too much hero ball. They jack up bad shots. They spend more time in position with their guards dribbling than actually moving the basketball. You wind up heaving up shots from bad angles at the end of the shot clock instead of getting into your sets, getting the ball into Armando Bacot. And when they're in that bad stretch, it kind of impacts their defense. And, once a game, starts to goes from a 1-possession game to a 3-possession game, if they don't clamp down, what happened last night is what happens.
Yeah, and let's be fair, Vodtech wanted it more. When you get to conference tournaments, and you're in that position, you have a bid locked up like North Carolina does, you sometimes forget and you're like, oh yeah, you sometimes remember, oh yeah, we're playing next Thursday. Let that team play one more game. And that's something I don't like sometimes with college tournaments.
Or here's the other thing, Rabbi. They looked past Vodtech at seeing, looking at a potential.
Maybe they did, but I don't think any team in the ACC should, especially Duke. I mean, Duke got some starts, but I don't think North Carolina. If North Carolina did that, that's on Hubert. That's on Hubert Davis, because that team. I like North Carolina a lot. I like watching them play. They had the best, I think I said, the best win in the country this year, winning at Duke on retirement day for Krzyzewski. No team in the ACC outside of Duke deserves to look past their next opponent, especially after.
Maybe.
Jay, I'll ask you about that. How much was the performance last night a bit of a letdown emotionally? Because think about this, they were riding high off of that big boat with it down in Cameron North Stadium.
Yeah. I mean that's a big one, and whether they were just flat, whether they were looking ahead to Duke because they already knew Duke was in the final and they wanted another shot at them, or they just ran into a team, as you guys said, who wanted it more.
That's exactly right.
And knowing that they were already locked in as they were going to be an 8 or a 9 seed, and that was pretty much already determined. They had slipped into the top 25 coming into that day for whatever various and sundry reasons. Hubert's not going to be happy with the effort he saw out there, because that's one of the things that he's preached all season is effort. And they got outplayed. They also got outworked, and that's something he's going to take those guys to task for. And a lot of the things that they did wrong are things that those of us who watch North Carolina all year, we have seen them. Those wrongs we've seen them far too often in too many games where that it's happened.
All right, let's move on. We'll talk about North Carolina and Duke in just a second, but let's move on to the mid-majors. These are the teams that when you see them tomorrow that people pray, no offense to you, Sister Jean, by the way, welcome back to the bracket, Your Holiness. These are the teams that people pray don't ruin their brackets come tournament time. But if you listen to us, maybe you can ride these horses through the tournament field. Jay, pick a pony.
I'm going with Davidson. out of the A10. They're 26-5, 15-3 in the conference. Their net's 43. Their strength of schedule is 143, but that's more of an indictment of the A10 as a league than anything else. You correspond that. Their strength of record is 32. So for most of us who follow the NCAAs, when you say Davidson, the thing that sticks in our head is Steph Curry putting this little North Carolina school on the map with his performance in the 2008 tournament, leading the 10th seeded Wildcats on a one shining moment like run to the Elite Eight as a sophomore, putting up 34 a game, almost 4 assists and 4 steals, shooting over 50% from the field and almost 53 from beyond the arc during a 3-game tear. They knocked off 7-seeded Gonzaga, 2-seeded Georgetown, 3rd-seeded Wisconsin. Curry scored a game-high 20.5 against 1-seeded Kansas. Davidson came within a bucket of knocking off that blue blood and advancing to the Final Four. They lost 59-57. That's what sticks in people's minds. But Bob McKillop has built a very solid program, taking the Wildcats to the NCAAs 9 times, and they went from dominating the Southern Conference to being one of the top teams in the A10. As I said, they finished 15-3 this year, winning the regular season title. Losing to Dayton in the regular season finale was not a great way to end the season, but while it helped Dayton, the prevailing opinion is that it didn't really hurt Davidson. They blew out Fordham in the A10 quarters, and they'll face St. Louis in the semis later today. They're projected as either a 10 or 11 seed, depending on whether you're following ESPN or the Athletic, but they could make some noise depending on where they land. Foster Loyer, Hyun-Young Lee, and Michael Jones lead a solid 3-guard lineup. All 3 have jacked up over 140 shots from 3, and all shoot it better than 38.6%. Loyer and Jones top 43% from beyond the arc. Loyer and Lee both average better than 16 a game to lead the team. Both average better than 31 minutes a game. 6'10" forward Luka Bracketology is their inside presence, leading the team in rebounding at 7.2 per game, and he blocks at 1.2. He chips in a little under 15 points a game on offense. Davidson has a solid 8-man rotation with the 5 starters, 6'9" Sam Menenga, who had 15 points in the win in the quarters, mans the other front court spot. They all average between 26 and 32 minutes per game, and McKillop is likely to shorten his rotation in the tournament. Lee has become the focus of the offense of late and will be the player the other team's game plan for. Here's the quote on his 6'7" perimeter wing by the head coach. Quote, he's evolved as a complete player. He rebounds the basketball. He's got guard skills, brings the ball up the court. He can make plays with the pass and the dribble, and we've always known about his ability to shoot the ball. In the 5-game stretch before the season finale loss to Dayton, Lee averaged 20.8 points per game on 56.9 shooting from the floor, 50% from beyond the arc on almost 7 attempts per game. In that same stretch, Loyer averaged 20.4 points per game on 47.7% from the floor, 36.1 from 3 on 7.2 attempts per game. He also hit 93% from the stripe on 5.8 attempts per game. Davidson can shoot it with the best of them. They're 17th in the nation at field goal percentage as a team at 48.4, 9th in the nation at 3-point percentage at 38.7. And they don't let their opponents do the same. They hold them to 41.9% from the floor and 34.2% from beyond the arc. If Davidson starters can stay out of foul trouble, and history shows that they can, they average between 1.5 and no more than 2.6 personal fouls per game, and shoot like they have this season, they could scare some higher-seeded teams.
Speaking of a team that could scare some higher-seeded teams, the likely memory of championship week is going to be Chattanooga's what the hell buzzer at the end of their Southern game. And Anthony, let's talk more about Chattanooga.
If that had happened in the tournament, that would have made the one shining moment real.
We'll probably still see it anyway. But
yeah, I mean, what a way to kick off championship week, right? Everything's going wacky, and you see David Jean-Baptiste's incredible buzzer beater over 3 defenders to win a conference championship in an automatic bid for the school. But Chattanooga was one of those teams that if you didn't watch them all season and you saw them in the Sweet 16, you'd be kind of taken aback. But this is a team that's very talented coming out of the Southern Conference. You think I've obviously mentioned Jean-Baptiste, 14.6 points per game. They're led by Malachi Smith, and if Chattanooga does go on a bit of a run, that's the name that you may get familiar with. Averaging 20 points a game. Silvio De Sousa averaged 11 points a game also. They're one of the more talented mid-major teams in the country, on top of the fact that they're one of the better rebounding teams. They have great size for one of those smaller mid-major schools. they were in the top. They were 42nd overall in offensive rebounding. But what makes Chattanooga the Mocs dangerous is they are very slow paced. I mean, they play almost backwards if you want to go that far as a slow pace. 288th in adjusted tempo, 317th in average offensive possession length. Basically, long story short, we saw this with Texas last year at Albany Christian. Remember that school last year in the tournament. If you fall behind with this team, particularly by double digits, you're going to get frustrated because you only have so many possessions, but as the game gets later and later. And that's something that Chattanooga has been able to do and has done a great job of, particularly when you have three offensive players who can go out and get their own points at any given moment. A couple of weeks ago, there was more of a discussion as an at-large team where they had back-to-back home losses to UNC Greensboro, VMI as well, that kind of put them in a position where they all but had to win the Southern Conference tournament to get in. And like I said, it's March Madness. It's crazy. What you expect? They get it on a buzzer beater. Right now, they're projected as a 13th seed, and that's a danger for any team that ends up as a 4 because those 4-13 matchups. You know, the 5-12s or 4-13s generally is when you see those occasional pop-up upsets happen in the very first round. But if there's a team that could literally destroy brackets in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, it would be Chattanooga because they have the offensive firepower, they have the rebounding that would give them their own extra possessions. But more importantly, they play at such a slow half-court pace that it would frustrate a team like maybe Illinois, even Ohio State, or as Joel Adari has them ranked right now against Arkansas. So this is a team that, I mean, if you're doing a bracket, you want to stick with chalk, but you see them and like, maybe I'll roll the dice. Maybe I'll give them a winner or two, just out of reinsurance. So Chattanooga is definitely my team to watch as far as mid-majors who can literally ruin everyone on ESPN and CBS Sports putting their brackets together this week.
Okay, before I pick my team, I want to just say I am embarrassed about Jay mentioning Steph Curry so much in his Davidson pick that I would never, ever go back to NBA stars being in the tournament to make my point. I'm picking Murray State. And of course, you remember the last time, or the most memorable time in the tournament, when they were a 12 seed in 2019, when Ja Morant was leading that team into the postseason. They got themselves. What happened? Yes, I am a hypocrite. That was the whole point. Anyway, they got a win over Marquette, and then they lost in the second round. And you would think, what is this Murray State program going to be post John Morant? And then we get the 2022 Racers, who are only 30-2, first to the Ohio Valley Conference. They won the conference tournament last week, so they're going to be sitting on the sidelines for a little bit until they play next Thursday or Friday. And oh yeah, they have won 20 consecutive games. It's not great history for the best record in the tournament to win a national championship. I don't think that's happened in the last, 25 years. But, oh, by the way, one fun, I have to get back to something in a second that I was wanting to mention about Chattanooga. But Murray State has two players who can go for 30 in any game in their backcourt of Tevin Brown, who had 23 points in the win against Morehead State last Saturday night, and Justice Hill, who had 21 points, just shot 38% from the field. And oh yeah, KJ Williams, who was also the 2022 OVC Player of the Year. This is the best Murray State team by far. They have not lost in the calendar year of 2022, and their last loss was to a little team known as Auburn on December 22nd. You put a team in front of them. They also beat Memphis, by the way, in that run early this year, who was also a team on the bubble. You put a team in front of Murray State, you beat that. They beat you. You put a team in front of Murray State, they'll win. That's pretty simple as that. A few things. Number one, Murray State is going to the MVC, the Missouri Valley Conference, next year, because I guess they think this is just so easy itself. They're going to be a formidable team to reckon with there. And if you look at the bracket projections, it reminds me a lot of, remember when Loyola got an 8 seed last year and Illinois was like, oh crap, we're playing them in the second round matchup? They are currently right now an 8 seed again, because obviously they're a top 25 ranked team, but we're just going to put them in. They are scheduled to play Marquette, ironically enough, the team who they beat in 2019 in that 12-5 game, with a possible matchup of Gonzaga in the second round. We're going to look at that matchup and we're going to be like, oh my God, that's going to be a titan of mid-majors. But to finish the point, I wanted to mention something happened in that Chattanooga, I think it was Furman game on Monday that I wanted to mention. Furman is the first team in the history of conference tournament finals to go 100% from the field in overtime and lose. An amazing stat that I saw that I was like, holy crap, how does that happen unless you can't keep the ball? All right. Finally, he's a legend in all of coaching, an icon in the state of North Carolina, and a headache for Jay to spell because he never spells phonetically on outlines or on teleprompters. But Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski is on his...
Why we never call him by his full name?
Well, guess what? He's retiring. He deserves it. Coach K deserves at least that. But Coach K is on the final portion of his farewell tour. Whenever Duke loses in the tournament, or if they win a title, that coach will be Coach K's last at Duke and very likely his last coaching ever. Let's reminisce through many different prisms of the man whose wins record in college basketball probably never gets topped, but who knows, with aging and robots that might change. Let's start with UNC fan extraordinaire and Duke hater Jay Kaplan.
As a longtime Tar Heel fan, I have only one way of viewing Coach K's career, and that's through the prism of the best rivalry in college basketball. I mean, while the Heels have gone from Dean Smith to Bill Guthridge to Brad Daugherty to Roy Williams and now Hubert Davis, the only guy that's ever patrolled the Duke sideline since I started following college basketball has been Coach K. So many of the games were classics that still cause me joy or pain. I'm going to give you a list now, grouping now that make almost every top whatever list of these matchups. February 2nd, 95, unranked Duke beating the Rasheed Wallace, Jerry Stackhouse-led number 2 UNC 102-100 in double overtime. Feb 28, 98, number 1 Duke beats number 3 North Carolina at home to give Coach K his 500th career win and also clinch the outright ACC title for the Blue Devils. March 6 of 05, number 2 North Carolina holds on to beat number 6 Duke 75-73 to claim its first outright ACC regular season crown since 93. Feb 18, 2015, number 4 Duke defeats number 15 UNC at home just 11 days after Coach Smith passed away. Before the game, the players, coaches, and staff members from both teams gathered at center court for a moment of silence to honor Dean Smith. February 5th of 92, a 9th-ranked Tar Heels team led by current head coach Hubert Davis, who is North Carolina's leading scorer at 21.4 per game, knocked off the number 1 ranked and undefeated Blue Devils 75-73 in what is referred to as the Bloody Montross game, for that iconic image of UNC center Eric Montross with 2 streams of blood coming down his face after a battle under the boards. All of those games aside, what UNC did on March 5th of this year, ruining Coach K's final game at Cameron Indoor Stadium and shutting up the Cameron Crazies with a 94-81 beatdown that was revenge for a 20-point win that the Devils handed the Heels a month earlier in Chapel Hill, will probably make future lists. Coach K went 50-47 all time against the team from 8 miles down the road, 22-19 at home, though he split the last 4 there. Here's an ironic stat for you guys. Coach K has faced UNC 6 times on March 5th, and he's 1-5 against them, including this year. UNC was already one of the bluest of the blue blood programs in college basketball when Coach K took over at Duke. In building the Blue Devils into a blue blood, winning ACC and national titles, Coach K not only made the Tobacco Road rivalry one of the greatest in college basketball, but one of the greatest in all of sports. We all know the players win or lose the games on the court, but we also know that in college basketball, the best coaches at the best schools are the larger-than-life faces of both their teams and the sport itself. And Coach K is why we all know where Durham, North Carolina is. As much pain as Coach K has caused me over the years, he was the last link to the heyday of the UNC-Duke rivalry. Now, it's possible that Hubert Davis and John Shire will continue the greatness we've come to expect from these Titans of the ACC, and the next generation of the rivalry will be just as good as the last. But at least for the short term, things won't be the same now that neither school has a legendary coach roaming the sidelines. Coach K, for the sake of college basketball, I hate to see you leave. But for the sake of my Tar Heel loving sanity, I'm glad you're going.
Well, it's not like John Shire's not going to recruit like he has for 20 years, pretty much, for Coach K, which is why he's in the position where he is at now.
Yeah, but you can't call either one of the current and future head coaches legends. So not yet, anyway.
Anthony, we're not going to talk about the legends of the future. Let's talk about the legends of the present.
Yeah, it's funny because growing up, my first exposure to Coach K was actually the video game. I mean, I think I took a picture of you guys once. Coach K basketball for Sega Genesis was really my first exposure to Coach K, but more importantly, college basketball, because I wasn't really into it as much then as a kid. But then, get to play with Arizona and Kansas, all these colleges, in a video game for really the first time. And find out who Mike Krzyzewski was, that kind of opened the door for me as far as my exposure to college basketball, and of course the tournament, the games being on in the afternoon, and watching the frustration of my mom not being able to watch the Young and the Restless because there were games going on. So that was my exposure. But if there's one thing I can take away from Coach K, is he became more than a coach. And that's something that the larger-than-life personalities do tend to grow into. Then like this, he's a disciple of the great Bobby Knight, and going to West Point, and how much discipline played into his style of coaching. But it didn't start out well in Duke. He was under 500 his first two seasons, 38 and 47, first three seasons, 38 and 47. There was a point where he may actually have gotten canned. I know it was like the unthinkable, firing Mike Krzyzewski from a head coaching job, but things kind of talked him out. Obviously, the national championships kicked in, but I looked at the former players that came back to Cameron Indoor Stadium. That last game, over 40 former players. Some that obviously could not make it, obviously like RJ Barrett, because of NBA scheduling issues, and even players and Rabbi would get into as well that we coached in the Olympics. LeBron James and all these other players letting their feelings know how big Coach K was to them in some capacity. I was reading a sporting news article, and I found this quote very interesting as far as his coaching style. A basketball team is like the 5 fingers on your hand. If you can get them all together, you have a fist. That's how I want you to play, he tells his players. When we lose, I say you didn't do a good job, there's no fist. Collective responsibility is saying we lost, why did we lose, and how we can get better. If we can do that, amazing things happen. And when you watch those Blue Devil teams, particularly ones with Grant Hill and Christian Laettner in particular, you had 2 future NBA stars, but they never played or never acted like they were bigger than the team. They always acted. The attitude was always team first, even when they had the individual stars that was going to stand out and be in the NBA. So that was one thing. Also, Jay Williams, he is as part of ESPN. Also, he was one of those players. But when they won those consecutive championships in 91, 92, they went on a 60-69 stretch, which is phenomenal over those 2 years. And you think about his teachings and to do it with even the limitations to allow the players to kind of grow into men on and off the basketball court. And obviously, like I said, when you looked at those former players coming back and you see and people were asking what was the hoopla behind his last game. And it was like, well, if you watch that environment and you watch the players coming back and you see all these former players, even TV personalities, sending their best regards to Coach Krzyzewski. An average coach doesn't get that. I mean, it takes a special coach, a special person, a special man, a player, man, woman, or player to get those regards. And Coach K over these decades has turned into just that, where he's not just, you don't look at him as just a head coach. You look at him as a leader, and a lot of these players, he was a father figure, for a lot of young players, young kids that was away from home for the first time, maybe did not grow up in the best environment. So I look at those things and what he grew into as being more of a lasting legacy than the actual X's and O's he was doing along those sidelines for so many years.
Yeah, Anthony, I read a quote in the Athletic story. At the point right now, I don't remember which one of his former players said it, but he said, you call a guy coach when you're playing for him out of respect for, the position he holds, as the leader of that basketball team. When you continue to refer to him as coach long after you've stopped playing for him, that's a sign of the impact that he has had on your life as a whole and the position of respect that he has, that he gets from you, because his impact on you went well beyond the basketball court and continues to do so. And I thought that's about as big a compliment as you can give somebody.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm just going to quickly mention, if anyone doesn't remember, he was one of the first assistant coaches of the Dream Team back in 1992. And 16 years later, he took over a almost in shambles organization of USA Basketball, the team that finished third in Athens in 2004. And then in 2008, 2012, he had the greatest ascension of players, and they built a team that was about as dominant as any international basketball team was. They had back-to-back gold medals. Outside of Spain, there was really no team that even came close to them. He really helped out a lot of NBA players, but the one funny thing about everything is he never really cared about playing in the NBA. There were 6 times when he was in the running for a basketball job. 1990 with the Boston Celtics, he pulled his name out. 1994, he was mentioned with the Trailblazers. He decided not to do it. He was linked to the Sixers and the Lakers in the early 2000s, decided not to do it. Nets in 2010, they made a run. He said, hell no, I would rather play and be loved in Durham. And then in 2021, because of Ricky Rubio being on the team, Minnesota tried to get him over there, but no. I think the fact that you can just know what Coach K's basketball impact is, not college basketball impact, straight up basketball impact is amazing. And I think the legacy of Coach K is going to continue throughout the time that we won't see him anymore. I don't think this is going to ever be Duke and Coach K is probably going to be the most synonymous college basketball coach linking outside of Warden and out UCLA. Yeah. And I don't know if necessarily you consider Coach K the best coach in history. Many people would think Wooden would be a little bit better, but you have to consider the most accomplished coach in history and the coach with the most longevity in basketball history is Coach K. And if you look at a picture of him from 1992 coaching at the Dream Team to a picture of him being honored in a 700-hour ceremony on Saturday last week, don't really notice too much aging, which is shocking.
No, I mean, Rabbi, you talk about the Dream Team. The thing that, like, I read the article in Sports Illustrated, but the thing that stood out, and this is a testament to just him as a basketball coach, he recognized early on that he could not treat these NBA All-Stars the same way he treated even seniors at Duke, and he figured out a way to make these superstars police themselves, be accountable to themselves. And he basically said, look, he got a team meeting together, pulled out a whiteboard, and he said, okay, give me rules. What are your rules? What's important to you? We're going to write them down. You guys are going to come up with the rules. These are the rules we're going to govern this team by. The last one to speak was LeBron. And he knew he needed LeBron's buy-in, even though he had already gotten it from Kobe and everybody else. But he knew he needed LeBron's buy-in. And LeBron took a while before he started talking. And when he finally did and kind of said his piece, Krzyzewski knew that he had them. He had these guys on board, and he knew from that point on he could coach them to where they needed to be to redeem America's place in the Olympic basketball community. So, that's a testament to him recognizing the difference between pro basketball players and college basketball players, even though he never really wanted to coach in the NBA, as you said.
Yep. That's going to be a very different place without Coach K. Before we go, I want to mention one very quick thing, and we're going to talk, me and Jay are going to start talking about this on Monday when we do our bracket show with an opener. It's amazing to see baseball come back. It's amazing how everything has happened. It's amazing to see how everything apparently really came together quickly. I'm going to tell you why right now. When baseball canceled the first week of the season, and they're going to play a full 162 game schedule starting on April 7th, and then they canceled the second week of the season one day before announcing that the season would be back under 2 days, I'm not sure. The third week would have included April 15th, and that is Jackie Robinson Day. And this year is the 75th anniversary of Robinson breaking the color barrier. Considering the backlash that would have happened if you didn't play on Jackie Robinson Day in 2022, the one thing I'm left to say before we go, don't fuck with Jackie Robinson.
Yeah.
And amen to that, Rabbi.
Yes. And by the way, the Mets home opener, two things that happened. They also, besides celebrating Jackie Robinson's 75th anniversary, the Tom Seaver statue is going to be unveiled at Citi Field also. So and the Mets obviously being the closest tie, and the team that did host the original Jackie Robinson night back in 1997. Major Baseball, they had to get this right, because it was the backlash they would have received had that second week been canceled, and this lockout would have dragged on, would have been substantial.
We're going to talk more about that on Monday, and me and Jay will hop on sometime during the night, probably a little bit around 9 or 10 o'clock, and talk about our first look at the brackets.
Anthony, I'll bring you guys Miami. I would bring you guys some souvenirs back. I don't know what exactly.
You bring your souvenirs and your money that you're going to win in your bracket back, please.
And Anthony, just so you know, saw your posts about leaving the
Breakfast Club, of course.
Yes, we won't forget about you.
Hey, let me do my closing, all right? For Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I'm Stephen Rabinowitz. Thanks for joining us this weekend.
If you do forget me, I'm cracking skulls, okay?
Mess with the bull, you'll get the horns.
Let's say la 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 la, get this thing done with. All right. YouTube.com/onthesportslines for all of the content that you've ever seen on this show. We're live on Facebook.com/onthesportslines. You pick one. We'll be there. And Jay, talk about Twitter.
At ONTH Sportslines, where you will see the link to this show and the link to Monday Night Show, and links to other things sports related that we think you will find interesting and should check out.
Check out listen to Jay to fill out the bracket show, and listen to Steve to figure out what not to fill out on the bracket show on Monday night. We're going to do it around 9 or 10 o'clock. We'll also have a first look into what the hell baseball is getting into with their 7,000 new rules for 2022. And don't worry, Anthony, we'll get even more in-depth with them as we get closer to opening day on April 7th. For all of us on the Sports Lines, good afternoon.
Enjoy Selection Sunday.